there were times when you really felt that you hated the white men of my country.
I know it hasn't been an easy time for you to adjust, first, to a new ambassador, second, a black one, thirdly, a woman ambassador.
I've always wanted to be free, to express myself, to take a chance.
I was born in the Transkei. The town is Tsolo and the village is Nkwenka. I was born on the 11th of August 1936.
Who is Barbara Masekela? I'm a woman. I'm a black South African woman. I'm a woman who like many other men and women, was not able to live in my country for 27 years. I am a woman who, like many of my colleagues inside and outside South Africa, prayed, worked, fought for the day when I could say with pride that I was a South African.
You didn't just want to be free, because you could be free, but a slave. You wanted to be free as a woman and to be free as a member of your society.
All the years that I lived outside South Africa, apartheid touched me on the skin because of what it deprived me of. The company of my friends, of my fellow compatriots, of my family. And I would say perhaps the height of that personal suffering, because I think sometimes we talk about struggling for freedom in very grandiose terms, but ultimately you can reduce it to the personal. And for me personally, it was when my mother died and I could not go to South Africa to bury her because I was forbidden from entering the country. And I need not describe to you the bond, because every one of us knows it, the bond between a mother and the child.
I was born in Sophia town before the great removal, the forced removal of African people. My family was moved to Deep Kloof, which is part of Soweto. I grew up in Deep Kloof. I went to school there.
Ambassador Diseko's office, good morning. Ambassador, I have the Director General of the Atomic Energy on the line. Would you like to speak to him?
Thank you.
I cover Austria, Croatia, and Slovenia in Central Europe. And I represent South Africa on the International Atomic Energy Agency. That's the fourth head. And I'm ambassador to the United Nations. It was very daunting in the sense that I was well aware of the fact that I was going to be the first female ambassador to the UN system appointed by the democratic South Africa. And expectations were very high at the UN. They still are. When they see us as an example, not only as an example to follow in problem solving, but also as a key factor, a resource that will make meaningful contributions. I remember when I grew up, this I shall never forget. I've never seen it anywhere in the world. The police would raid the houses at about 4 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning, asking for passes. Those that didn't have a stamp in the passes that said they qualified to be in the area would be lined up and handcuffed. And they would move from house to house collecting people who were in those areas illegally until by 10 o'clock they had a row of black men, a long queue of black men being marched up and down the streets. When I left, I was in my early 20s. I'd been a teacher. I think what took my political involvement a stage further was my teaching experience at the school where the 1976 uprisings began. I didn't leave in 1976. It tore my heart when some of them came to me and said, "Ma'am, we have to leave because if we stayed, we would be arrested. We're not sure we'd be able to survive the experience."
I happened to step into the embassy for the first time on the 10th of May this year, exactly 1 year after the inauguration of the president, and one cannot miss that sense of history. And so it was with a sense of that awesomeness, that determination that even here we've got to bring to bear the reality that we want in South Africa.
Zu den Getränken kommen und rechts bitte.
It helps to have the experience, to have spent so many years organizing different platforms around the world in support of South Africa. It helps. So you come with that richness of experience, I think, into the job. It also helps to have lived somewhat in Europe, to know certain differences. Each country has its own profile.
Yes, I came to Tanzania. This was the only country where I could come, or where my comrades could come, because Botswana was still Bechuanaland, and Southern Rhodesia, Zimbabwe was still Southern Rhodesia, and Zambia was still Northern Rhodesia, even though already we had people helping us in Botswana to go through. We had our own network already. very nice. In Mazimbu, I didn't really stay for long periods. I would come or stay for short periods because I was posted to Norway, and the Norwegians were supporting the project there. And I would come 3 times a year to see what is going on and to attend meetings and so on. And of course, before my posting, I had to come to Mazimbu and study the situation because I was going to get deeply involved with the donors.
Hello, South African High Commission, Dar es Salaam.
What I can say is that, as you know, we were a government in exile, and we practiced what we wanted, the way we wanted to run that country when we go back to South Africa. Exactly. We had all the departments. So going back to South Africa, actually, we went back to South Africa to practice what we were taught and what other governments internationally do.
Triomphe de Brest. Einlauf immer noch Volcan de Bieros-Franco. Volcan de Bieros-Franco.
Women were in the support groups who were not really in the, like for instance in Umkhonto, but they were the supporters of Umkhonto by seeing to it that this army of the people works. Some of them were soldiers in this army. So you could see that, and also they were wives, they were sisters, they were the children of the soldiers. So it doesn't matter where you looked, they were always women. And they pulled their weight wherever, whether it was just being in the house and looking after the children, because we did have families even outside, or whether it was in the army, they pulled their weight as MK soldiers, and they did the same thing that the men did.
Conduisez.
Parfait.
Nous conduisons.
Oui.
Il fait. Non. Il fait.
Non, c'est toujours on. C'est toujours on. Ils font.
Ils doivent. Oh non, il est très. Il
Oui,
complètement.
celui-là, il est complètement nul.
We did not want to be in a ghetto. So we said from the beginning, we don't want a minister who will deal with women's affairs. We want women's affairs to be integrated into every aspect of South African life.
In actual fact, when I walk through villages, I don't look at women who are there and sad and leave them alone. I pull them up, I call them, and we discuss the situation of women in our villages and what we as women can do to make our lives and the lives of our children worth living. Yes, you are right. One does see those sad eyes of those women.
In your postcard, you asked me what the strongest power that motivates a woman's thinking is. Basically, I think it is an awareness of and sensitivity to the needs of humanity, something which in the African context is reinforced by socialization. And this, galvanized into common purpose to effect collective action, can be a force that can translate into a mass of power that can move mountains.
They were the women in South Africa, because they were so intimately related to the immediate effects of apartheid, of colonization. They were the ones, therefore, who took a leadership position in the survival of the African community, specifically, because they looked after the babies. They were the ones, when the migrant laborers were away, who had to see that the family was fed, that children were in good health, that the old were looked after. And so that you find that in addition then to their political activism in the political sector, you find that their demand, therefore, for the whole issue of women, of gender, to be part and parcel of all policy making, was really a demand to be given the recognition that they have made, to the establishment of the new South African society.
I knew that I'd be arriving to a situation where ordinarily countries tend to have institutional memory. They've had people who've worked in the UN system for a very long time. They can always pull on that and be able to make decisions on the spot. So not only would I be coming to represent the country, but I'd also have to ensure that very rapidly we acquired that institutional memory in order to be able to make strategic interventions in the UN system as a whole.
Then has to decide about the law. As far as the question about obtaining...
Being out of your country, you sort of preoccupy yourself with coping, surviving, creating a life of your own, but you can never really, because none of these countries outside are your own countries. But at the back of your mind, you don't realize this. I realized when we unbent that I'd always walked around with a hole in my heart, or a lump in my heart. And suddenly when I saw that, Mr. de Klerk making the announcement, something just melted in my heart. I felt whole again. I felt I belong somewhere. I have a country of my own. It doesn't matter what happens now. I am part of something that I can always go back to. That knowledge that I could never go back home. I had been able to reestablish my life, but somehow you can never really come to terms with it, especially if the decision is not yours. Circumstances force you to leave the country. I think more or less all of us had a cumulative stock of experiences that we carried with us, watching our fathers being marched up and down the streets, watching our mothers being treated as if they were children and being confined to particular areas, comparing your situation with a situation that ironically enough you were taught about in the classrooms of white South Africa, which was intended to convey to you that you're a lesser being and your white counterpart was a greater being. That in itself raised questions in you.
Yes, there were times when you really felt that you hated the white men of my country. You really felt that this was not fair, and that I just felt that I needed to join those people who were in the struggle against these people. Even, in fact, if it had to be the armed forces, I would do that. I really used to feel so terrible, particularly because when I left, I was going away for 1 year. I left my children. And I thought that in a year's time, I'd be back. And I didn't. And I didn't see my children for 10 years. I used sometimes to be very bitter. In fact, I did say in some of the interviews I had that time, during those times, that the South African regime owed me the childhood of my children because I missed all that.
I remember when we were kids in Witbank, and my mother took us to town one day, to buy us shoes, my brother and I, Hugh, and we were so well dressed, and I think I must have been 3 or 4, and our whole day was spoiled because here we were all well dressed, and my mother was going to buy us shoes, and it was a happy sunny day in South Africa, and there was a white woman with her children, and the children looked at us and pointed at us and said, "Ma kyk, die babajankies is aangetrek, net soos mense." And I remember how angry my mother got.
At no stage did I ever feel that we're not going to make it. There are times when I really felt very despondent, felt sometimes even quite tired. But I always knew that we would make it. I always knew that the struggle would succeed.
I think that when you are going through a process like this, which is a very, very difficult one, there are times you feel, will I ever go home? And you need people who can be there all the time to reassure you, to say that, yes, we are getting there. We are getting there. They were never negative. They were positive all the time, and that really kept some of us going. Not that I ever gave up. No, not really. But you just said to yourself, here are these women. They never get angry. They never get tired. They just go on and on. Why can't I do the same? So that was it.
President Tambo, when he was president of the ANC, when he was asked about what do we mean by black, he made this definition that when I speak about the black people of South Africa, I'm speaking about black people, meaning Africans. I'm speaking about the colored and the Indian people who were also oppressed. And I'm also speaking about those whites who respect the ideals and aspirations of the black people. For them, all that contingent is black.
I would think it's very strange. It would be very
unnatural if they didn't see that. It's the most obvious thing about me. I'm black. The other night, you will recall that I said it must have been very difficult for them when I arrived. First, it was a new ambassador. Anybody new in a situation where people are used to the ways of the other is going to be a little odd in the beginning for themselves and the others as well. But I also said that here I was black, and they smiled. And then when I said, and a woman, they applauded. So these things come together in one package. They work, I think, positively for the country.
Southern trees bear a strange fruit. There's blood at the leaves and blood at the roots. Black bodies swaying in the southern breeze. There's a strange fruit